This public meeting of the Town of Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can access this meeting while in progress by Zoom Video Communications, Inc. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comment if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by telephone, cell phone, or personal computer using Zoom. And per tradition, we will start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
Emily Winter.
Bill Payne.
Julian Gosanos.
Rebecca Longbaugh.
All right. And first up this evening, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now open a public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a request for determination of applicability for 59 Sampson Road, the conversion of an existing barn to an in-law apartment. Rebecca, is the applicant or someone representing the applicant here this evening?
Yes, we have Ryan Proctor of Dillis and Roy, and we have the applicant, Brian Boyle, present, and I believe Doug Story just joined as well.
Okay.
So we do have representation for that project. If you would like, I can certainly hand it over to Ryan Proctor. I know, Ryan, I just saw your email about, he had sent me a colored plan. So he may be able to walk the commission through the project.
Yeah, I was curious as to what was jurisdictional, but yeah, if Brian is able to explain that and is willing to kind of give us an overview of what the project is and what we're looking at, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. Is it okay if I share my screen?
That's fine. Yes, if you're able, Ryan. Okay.
Okay. Can everyone see the plan on the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right. So first off, thank you for your time tonight. Just for the record, I'm Ryan Proctor with Dillis and Roy, representing the applicant Brian Boyle. And as Rebecca said, Doug Story is here as well. So the proposed project, the applicant is proposing to convert the existing barn on the property into an in-law apartment. And that is going to require a connection, a sewer line connection into the existing sewer system. A portion of the site indicated by the blue line shown on the plan, this is the 200-foot riverfront. And again, the 100-foot buffer zone eclipses the property a little bit. And this is tributary to Still River, which is actually located across the road on the other side of Route 117. So as shown on the plan, we're right on the corner of Sampson Road and Main Street. The area that's jurisdictional to the Conservation Commission, I highlighted in red here. There's just a little section of the sewer line from the barn into the existing septic system. Approximately 300 square feet of disturbance that we're proposing within the 200-foot riverfront area only. So there's no buffer zone work on for this project. And again, it's just this little section here. Given the nature of the project, when they install a sewer line, it's pretty quick disturbance. So they dig the trench, they put the pipe in, it gets inspected, and they backfill. So we're not anticipating large amounts of fill being moved around the site, nor it being undisturbed for a long period of time. So all in all, a relatively minor disturbance project. We do show some erosion control. Wanted to kind of talk that through with you guys to see if you think it's applicable and necessary. There is quite a substantial natural buffer between the river by way of the yard. There's a fence along the property line, the crown of the road. There's quite a bit of structure in the way. And again, it is a pretty temporary disturbance. But that's certainly something that we're open to doing with the erosion controls. We have submitted to the Board of Health. They had a couple of comments, which we've addressed and resubmitted. That was a little while ago, and we haven't heard anything back since. So I assume that we're all set with them. I think that's all I have to say about that. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments you may have.
I'm curious about the topography. So is it kind of going downhill towards Main Street, towards 117? Just looking at where you have the erosion controls.
Yeah, in this tributary area next to the driveway here, this actually goes more towards Sampson,
Yeah.
the way the contours are. So it's pretty unlikely that it's going to go directly down towards 117, where we're proposing the work.
Right, right. I was more curious if anything would migrate the other way towards the 200-foot riverfront. Is that upland? Is that?
So the high point of the site is this corner here.
All right, so everything's
more or less going down the edge of the driveway. It's almost going parallel with the riverfront, the line shown here.
makes sense. All right. Other commission members have any initial questions or thoughts?
I have a question. Ryan, how duration wise, I know this would be a very short duration of work within the riverfront area, but how many days do you think excavation, install pipe, and then backfill?
Something like this, I can't imagine more than 5 days at the most. I know it's a septic system, leach field, and sewer line can be put in a week. So, and then we're just doing the line and the tank here. We're not doing the actual pipe and stone. So I wouldn't think it would be on more than a few days.
Do we know what time of year the work is proposed? Or are we trying to do this winter or waiting until spring?
I'd have to defer to either Doug or Brian on this one, but I assume that they're trying to go as soon as possible.
Doug has his hand raised, Mr. Chair. I believe he can address
Yeah.
the question.
Doug, that would be fantastic if you'd be able to answer that.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Doug Story, two-story building. I'm the general contractor for the project. We definitely are planning to start as soon as our permit's issued, and I think this is the last remaining open issue on the permit. We'll probably start on the work on the barn right away, and probably do the septic work in the spring, more like March. I'm not 100% certain on that time frame, March, April, but there's no need to do it right away, and we got lots of work to do in the barn, so I think we do that on the tail end of the project. We would obviously put up whatever erosion control you thought was appropriate if necessary. We would do it as quickly as possible, and really the only thing that limits us in getting everything closed back in is sign-offs. So we'll dig it, we'll put it in, we'll call for the inspection. It could be done in 3 days, in a perfect scenario, but it also could be 2 weeks if we're waiting for somebody to inspect it. So I don't want to commit to 1 week, but we do it as quickly as we possibly can based on the inspections.
I think based on that, Brian, if we asked just for like a straw wattle along, I don't think it can hurt, especially if the work is being done in March. If we're looking at mud season, I know we're pretty far from the riverfront with this, but it's, better safe than sorry, I guess.
Yep. Can I ask you, are there any major trees or anything that need to come down for us to be able to run this? I mean, or within the jurisdictional area, I should say. Any major trees that need to come down? Anything bigger than, say, like a 3-inch or 4-inch diameter?
No. As you can see by the drawing, we're going to run it along the driveway. It's all clear area now. There may be a shrub in the driveway area down by the tanks. I'm not 100% sure of that, but there's no large trees, and we're not planning to take any trees down.
Okay. Other commission members have any questions? Rebecca, do you have any initial thoughts on this, or I'd like to hear your thoughts in general?
I don't have very many thoughts on this aside from one of the requests, obviously, when the permit came through, was that they file an RDA, at least because it is within the outer riparian area, even though it may be a landscaped area. So I do appreciate them addressing that. The other thought or question I had, which I believe I had already inquired about. But is the footprint of the existing barn expanding in any way? And if it is not, I think that there's no issue as far as the commission's jurisdiction, but if it is, that should also be incorporated on this plan.
All right.
So I'll answer that.
Please.
There's no expansion to the barn. There is a covered porch being added on the, I guess it's the west side, the side where the red lines come off the corner of the barn. So there's about a 8-foot by 20-foot, I can't remember exactly the size, but a covered entry there because the door will be right on the corner. So it's just a roof. And I think there are 4 sonotubes. So we will, just be digging those footings in as well. Those would go right in and be covered immediately. And again, that'll probably happen the same time that we do the septic work. So we'll do all the digging at once. It was on the plan that was submitted with the building permit package. I mean, you certainly can see that covered porch. I don't think it's on this drawing here when you look at the barn.
I mean, as far as that's concerned, I think that's something that if the commission so chooses to, if they're comfortable with what's being proposed, I think that's something just to note that the square footage of that covered entrance in a condition, but if someone could find that while the commission's finishing their questions, I think that would be helpful. Unless the commission has some outstanding requests.
Any other commission members have outstanding requests? That was a good question, Rebecca. And if we could find out the total square footage of that proposed area or approximate total square footage, that would be excellent.
I'm looking at that right now.
That's excellent. I can ask it this time, Rebecca, is anybody here from the public to comment on this evening?
Again, the public may raise their hand or utilize the chat function or physically wave, but that may take me a moment. Brian has raised his hand.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, first of all, thanks everybody. Thanks Ryan and Doug for being here. I do happen to have a PDF version of the plans in case people wanted to see the covered porch, and I think the dimensions are right on there. So I don't know if somebody wanted to enable screen sharing, but I could share that.
You should be able to share now, Brian.
If you'd be willing to do that would be great, I think.
Okay, hold on. Okay, so it's oriented a little bit differently than you were seeing on the drawing, but this is the little covered entryway. So basically what it's doing is it's a relatively small wraparound porch to cover this entrance to the building. So it's not like going the full length of this side and it's not going the full length there. So I think this looks like it's 8 feet if I'm reading these dimensions across.
Actually,
roughly.
I've got it, Brian. It's 5 feet wide in both directions. And in one, the length is 11'9" on one side. And I think it's 13'2" on the other side. So it's a wraparound. It extends out 5 feet. It has 4 footings, as I said. 2 of which, or at least one would be dug in the driveway. The other 3 would be dug on the side. And only extends out 5 feet in either direction.
Who's good enough at math to do the square footage on that quick?
Okay, let me tell you what that is.
I was gonna say what? Had a calculator.
Well, because it's a wraparound, you have to.
Yeah, you got to do both and cut one off.
It's
Yeah.
60. It's 60 plus. What is that dimension? 11.9 minus
Yeah.
out 5, you said it's 5 wide? Yeah, so 6
Yeah.
times 535.
So
So
5
60
times,
plus 35, 95 square
They're
feet.
approximately 90 or 95.
Well, yeah, it's 5'10" wide. It's not 5 wide. It's almost 6 feet wide.
So call it 6 times 12, 72
Yep, and yeah, then you're
plus
subtracting a little
35.
bit.
So
So
call it
what's it?
107.
107.
So
So if we said not to exceed 115 square feet, that should give a little bit of wiggle room all around,
yep, that should work.
right? And again, that's the side that's technically furthest from the resource area. It's on the uphill side away from the river, as I'm trying to picture how the two come in together. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. And again, and I'll ask Rebecca on this one. I'm not as familiar with the site. Those erosion controls, I think straw wattles would be fine. Do you think they'd be necessary? Do you think there'd be migration? Because migration of the resource area, yes, but the resource area being the yard before it gets to the 117.
I will always be an advocate for erosion and or sediment controls whenever you're using or doing ground disturbance, but that's at the discretion of the commission. As Ryan said, and I believe the condition of where the alterations are proposed are currently lawn, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a relatively level area. It's graded toward, the grade moves toward or drops towards the driveway. And then if you cross the driveway and across the yard to the opposite side of the house and barn, then it drops to Main Street. And then on the other side of Main Street, you have Still River.
Right.
So that's what I understand of the lot as well. Again, I'm always an advocate for erosion control, but I also am supportive of the commission's decisions at their discretion. So,
well, I was gonna say, in the past, we've done a condition where the erosion controls will be in place and approved by the conservation agent before work begins. Would you be comfortable with a condition like that as well?
me or the applicant?
You actually,
Yes, yeah, I'm comfortable with.
Yep. And
yes.
for the applicants, the same. If you were to install, and again, we'd probably say a straw wattle, looking at what we're actually dealing with there. Would you be comfortable just getting that in place as it was drawn out in the designs tonight, and asking Rebecca to come out and take a look and make sure it all looks good before you start?
Yeah, if I could answer that, I would. I think that's fine. I think we can run it right along the side of the driveway on the edge of the lawn, and then we'd be digging on the other side of it, and that would also serve to keep any debris from getting in the driveway during the construction. So that'd probably help Brian out a little bit too.
Okay.
So I think that makes perfect sense. We certainly put it in before we started. The area where the one footing will go in the driveway will be sort of in the middle of the construction going to the building off the driveway. So I'd rather keep that wattle on the lawn, not on the driveway. It would kind of obstruct us from working there. And then when we dig the footing in the driveway, if you want us to put a wattle around that as well, we can, but I'd rather just do it when we dig it rather than have it in the way while we're doing the other construction, if that makes sense.
It seems to make sense to me. Rebecca, your thoughts on that?
I would lean towards what the commission chooses on that. Again, typically erosion and sediment controls also act as a limit of work, but I understand, again, as Doug just described, how it may be impeding their project. And again, I'm comfortable with the grading and the material that's already been altered between the proposed alteration area and then the Still River on the opposite side of Main Street.
Okay. All right. Any commission members have any additional questions, comments, thoughts? All right. So hearing none, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 59 Sampson Road. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an I as well.
I apologize. I have one just point of order I have to ask, and I should have asked
Please.
it before. Jillian, are you in a butter to this project?
No,
Okay,
Your other
several,
side.
thank you.
other side down the street.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, I wasn't sure where yours was.
That's a good point. Good catch, almost. Okay, so we have officially closed. So I'd like to make a motion that we have a -3 determination for the request for determination of applicability 59 Sampson Road with the following conditions. That erosion controls as discussed this evening will be in place and approved by the town's conservation agent before work begins. And that the proposed covered porch that is being added to the footprint of the now in-law apartment be no greater than 115 square feet total. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an I as well.
Thank you. So I will have this drafted. The commission members will collect or we will have them come sign the document. Once it is ready, please send me an email as to if you would like it mailed to your address, Brian, or Ryan's address. I'm not sure, or even Doug's, whomever you would prefer that. An electronic copy will be uploaded to the online permitting platform of Viewpoint as well, once it is issued. And then it does get sent to DEP also. However, there is a 10-day appeal period. So you do have to wait that 10-day period and then before you start work. Any questions?
No, thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Everybody ready to continue? All right. In that case, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now open a public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent for Lot 5 Meadow Road, the construction of a single-family home and shared driveway. Rebecca, can I ask, before I ask if there's somebody here for the applicant, I noticed next on our agenda would be Lot 6 Meadow Road. Does it make sense for me to open that now too, because we would be discussing the same shared driveway? Or is it cleaner and neater not to?
That is at the discretion of both the commission and the applicant's representative. But just the vote, if there is a vote, or rather when there is a vote, we need to be sure that they would be 4 separate votes. So there would be 2 to close and then 2 to issue.
Okay. So is the applicant here this evening or representative for the applicant?
I believe Brian Proctor is also, is also representing this project.
Yes, so I'll just preface by saying we don't have a file number yet for either of these projects.
Okay.
So if it's possible to present them together this meeting and then possibly separate them at the continued hearing, that would probably be the best way to do it. Because again, like Rebecca said, the driveway does kind of tie in together, given that it's shared. So.
All right. In that case, I'm going to go ahead, unless any commission members object, I'm going to go ahead and just open both meetings so we can kind of talk about them concurrently. All right. So at this point, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now open the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent for Lot 6 Meadow Road, a single-family home, along with a shared driveway. Now that we have opened both, would you be willing to give us an overview of the project?
Absolutely, and yes, I think it actually makes sense to start with 6 here, so we can start right on Meadow Road. Yep. So a couple months ago, we were here for lots 7 and 8 of the same development. lot 4 was the one that was currently being developed. We're on the other side of lot 4 than where we were for lot 7 and 8, if that makes sense. So we are on the northeast side of Meadow Road, and we have a shared driveway for lots 5 and 6. I appreciate that you colored up the plan for me, Rebecca. I didn't do one here. But shown on this plan, the green lines indicate the 100-foot buffer zones. There is a vernal pool located on the property line for lot 6 and lot 5. Yep, right there up near the road. And then additionally, there is another wetland resource area along the abutting property on the other side of the driveway as well. So of course, the main focus was to avoid putting a driveway in the buffer zone. So we have placed the driveway in the most logical place right in between the 2 buffer zones for these 2 wetlands as shown. Similar to what we've done for the other driveways, up near Meadow Road, we are proposing a couple of stormwater management areas to just kind of capture any runoff that might be running towards the road and prevent it to running onto Meadow Road and subsequently across the street. So we're proposing 2 basins on the side of the road. Again, that's similar to what we've done on the other driveways. Additionally, on the downhill side of the proposed driveway that we're looking at here, we are proposing our erosion control barrier just upland of the buffer zone to, again, just prevent any runoff from going to that vernal pool. The actual project, and this is a mirror for both projects, both lots 5 and 6, is the construction of the driveway, the house, and the septic system. The house and the leaching area are completely outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. However, there is some subsequent grading, breakout grading for the septic that falls within the 100-foot buffer zone. And again, right on the limit of work, we're proposing erosion control barrier again, downgrading of the proposed work to prevent it from running towards the resource area. I think that's all I have to say about this one. Happy to answer any questions on layout if you want before we jump over to lot 5 in the back.
I have a question. Brian?
I'm not sure if Emily was asking a question. Your audio came through.
The buffer zones don't appear. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? My
Yes.
internet connection, I have no idea what's causing that, but the buffer, the buffer offset downhill appears to be greater than the buffer offset, the green line. I don't know if that's to scale or not, but they do not look equal. They do not, I don't know if one of them's 100 and one of them's 75, but they look to scale, they look completely different.
So no, I think on the
wetland,
uphill side,
delineation.
I'm sorry.
Did you guys
on the
get that?
uphill-
Yes.
Yes. On the uphill side, I think the blue circles are drawn on the other wetland on the high side of the driveway. I think that is the 25-foot wetland offset that those are drawn on.
That is correct.
Okay.
So
the
this arrow
wetland-
here, you can see points. This says bordering vegetated wetland. Sorry, it's a picture of the plan. And then this line here is the actual wetland. Where on
Okay.
this side, so that's me, sorry. I was annotating the plans and should have done it equal. I apologize, but so here, Ryan is correct. This is the edge of the potential vernal pool, what they have delineated as that previously. And then here is the BVW. So that is correct on the upper side or the right-hand side on this picture. This is the 25-foot. There is no 25 shown associated with the vernal pool.
Thank you.
Other commission members have initial questions on lot 6? Right,
Was the wetland delineation previously approved, Rebecca? And the potential vernal pool that has been verified, has that all been verified in the past?
I do not recall an ANRAD or the resource area delineation being approved by the commission prior. That potential vernal pool was found when I was out on site. I think it's lot 7, if I'm not mistaken, that's adjacent to this property. All the work was done outside of the jurisdictional area of the commission, and they actually moved the proposed driveway because this was found on site. At the time, it was spring, it was holding water, it had various amphibian species there with some egg masses. So at that time, they identified it as a potential vernal pool. I'm unsure if more time had been spent out there by the prior applicant or by this applicant's representative to look into that further, or if they plan to go back out this spring to have it certified. But that was the extent of what I have seen out there as well. But I did not go beyond that to look at these other resource areas on the opposite side of the proposed driveway.
All right. Any other initial questions on lot 6? And I will say to Emily and the applicant and to Rebecca, I know we're waiting for DEP file numbers, so we're probably going to have to continue anyways. And I think it would be a good opportunity for us to actually get out there on a site visit and try to pick a day for that so we can kind of see more. I remember lot 7 and looking over this way, knowing that something was going to happen eventually, but I can't picture it well enough in my head. But anyways, any other initial questions for lot 6 right now? And and I should ask any members of the public here to comment on lot 6 Meadow Road.
Again, you can use the raise hand function, chat function, or physically wave.
All right, I'm not seeing any.
Actually, hi, Brian.
Go ahead. Yes.
This is Nan Schnitzler, and I'm not real good with Zoom, but
It's all right.
I live on Meadow, 81 Meadow, and just observing as I walk the road every day, the driveway that's already been dug out for lot 7, water is already running across the road. Just FYI. I know mitigation measures have not yet been put in place, but you know, there is water and it's freezing.
Yeah. No, that's good to hear, Nan. And we should, again, I won't ask where that project is when it concerns this project. I can see that they are
Next
trying to-
door, lot 7.
No, I know where it is.
Oh.
I just I don't know that it's material to what we're discussing tonight.
Ah.
But I can't really ask the applicant about a project that's not in front of us.
Okay, it's just an observation.
It's a good reminder of us too, when we go out there to take a good look at what those mitigation plans are at the end of this shared driveway, the catch basins they're proposing, and we'll probably ask the applicants to mark out those areas as to where they're going to be and give us an idea of their size and what type of flow they should be able to handle. So I appreciate the comment too, because it is definitely worth looking, and it's something that we can condition in a different way if we find the ones that we had conditioned in the past are not working or functioning correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other members that comment on lot 6? Yeah. Seeing none right now, can we move on to discussing lot 5, Ryan?
Absolutely. So this is straight continuance, straight back up the hill from lot 6. The big wetland resource area that you see on the top of the plan here, a little leg of that was visible on the lot 6. So this is the wetland just runs right up the property line. Again, we are proposing to construct a house, septic, and at this point it's a private driveway just for lot 5. Again, the house and the septic are entirely outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. However, in this, for this proposed driveway, a section of the driveway is within the 100-foot buffer zone as shown. So again, we are proposing erosion control barriers between the proposed work and the wetland area. The general topography of this site is very similar to the one that we walked for lot 7 and 8, where it's a pretty consistent slope heading down from the top of the hill towards Meadow Road. So it is relatively unlikely that runoff is going to go laterally towards the wetland. However, we are proposing a grass swale and erosion controls alongside the driveway to help mitigate that potential at all. Again, I think that's all I have to say about this one. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Well, I was gonna say, as I was saying earlier, it's probably one we'd like to come out and definitely do a site visit. And we're
Absolutely.
probably gonna have to continue anyways.
Yeah.
And I guess what I would say is what I would like to see with that is kind of the center line of the driveway. And then just like for instance, for lot 5, I'd like to see where it looks like you're basically just doing some grading and then the driveway within the buffer zone. But if we can somehow mark where the buffer zone area is, the section of the driveway that's within the buffer zone and or where the grading is going to take place. And some of that we can figure out just looking at the plans while we're out there.
Yep.
But just some of those key facets so we can kind of really get a good idea where things are going to go in or they're proposed to go in.
Definitely, yeah. So we learned from last meeting, we had the stuff staked out. It was actually staked out today.
Oh, good.
So when we go to schedule the sidewalk, it's already marked out in the field, so we won't be waiting on that. And we did center line of the driveway, we did the septic boxes and the house boxes. So we'll be able to see all the big features out on the property.
Okay. Any commission members have questions on lot 5, additional questions, comments, thoughts on this lot?
Is the driveway paved or is it gravel? Is it permeable?
It's going to be paved.
Paved.
How do you handle the runoff to the top right heading toward the wetlands off that driveway?
So along the driveway, we do have the grass swale a little ways down that starts right around where the septic is. Across the driveway from that, we have the grass swale, and that runs pretty much the length of the driveway all the way down through the lot 6 and into the stormwater management areas at the beginning of the shared driveway.
I think what would be helpful, and that we had asked, I think, on the other two houses that came before us before, is like one picture. I know on one of the maps, there's a shrunk down, like full picture, but it doesn't have any detail on it. It just would be good to be able to see, and I don't know, Rebecca, maybe I missed it, if it's in there, but it looks like they're broken up, just to see how it's all laid out.
Yes, we do. There is an overview. I don't know if it's on this plan here, but it does show just lot 5 and 6, and it shows the driveway, the houses, and the septics, and in relation to the buffer zone.
So that's not on what I have here for this evening, but it was in your packets that went out. If you look at the plans, I'll resend it tomorrow though. And I'll see if I can zoom into it a little bit better. So maybe it's a little bit more clear.
Rebecca, did you have any initial thoughts or comments on lot 5 or 6?
I do. When it's relative to the local bylaw. So under the local bylaw, it only allows for the commission to consider temporary or limited disturbance. And I, particularly on this lot that's displayed now, I'm seeing, and I understand some of the grading on site that exists. And I do appreciate that you put in some effort to mitigate alterations with the grass swale, mitigating runoff, but I think there's enough room here to maybe look to see if you can pull the driveway out of the adjacent upland resource area, because under our local bylaw, that is a resource area in itself. And again, the commission's able to consider limited or temporary disturbance that needs to be mitigated. And when I'm looking at this, I'm seeing something permanent being altered within that area. I think the first lot, oh, wrong way, sorry, lot 6, you've come close to meeting that. There may be some concerns, as Brian said, that we need to add some, or encourage you to add some systems or maybe some nature-based solutions to address some of the runoff on site to ensure it doesn't get to the roadway. And again, I'm not speaking for the commission, but just when I'm reviewing these plans. There's a slight concern that the well is so close to that 100-foot, but typically drilling a well, you don't have too much outside of the point that it's actually being drilled. Then the grading within the adjacent upland resource area, again, potentially a permanent disturbance, but I believe my green line here, my annotation actually is over that line. So the septic, I just want to clarify for the commission, the septic isn't itself actually within that adjacent upland resource area. But so that's really just keeping in mind that it is a resource area under a bylaw and making sure that you're understanding that you need to meet those performance standards. And so that the commission can have a really good understanding of what's happening on site and how you're mitigating these all potential alterations.
Thank you.
Rebecca, I've got one more question. Where the green 100-foot buffer comes right up against the corner of the house, is everything within the 100-foot buffer, will that all be naturalized after this construction? So they'll have wooded area right to the corner of the home?
That would be a question. So what is the scale on this? I cut it off. I think this is this scale 30 feet, Ryan?
I think it's 30. Yep, 30
Okay.
scale.
So it may be about 10, actually about 10 feet off the house, if not slightly more than that, Bill,
Okay.
but I don't have that answer. That if their limit of work is the erosion control, then, and this area is not being disturbed, or that's something that the commission wants to condition or ask of the applicant or the representative, I think that's a valid question.
Because if you're digging foundations later on at that point, you'll be disturbing within that wetland, correct?
Within the adjacent upland resource area, yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And again, I think we'd have to see how the house box is marked out in the field, because these are good questions. I just think it's one of those we're going to need to see before we can get the real answers on.
Can we can we look at the other lot for a minute? Rebecca brought up a good point about pulling whatever can be pulled out of that 100-foot buffer. And I'm curious if it's possible, and this is just a proposed option, if the well is moved further back, and then the septic tank, the leach field can be, not the tank, but the leach field can be brought further uphill, and then you can get that driveway out of the buffer zone, or at least pull it as far out of the buffer zone as possible. Is that something that could be looked into? Because it looks like there's a lot of I guess the property line. Yeah, if it could be brought closer to the property line so you're still maintaining that 100-foot offset. Could everything kind of move, up toward the property line and then suck the driveway in, or even look into bringing the driveway into the front of the house instead of having the garage entrance off the side, which is pushing your whole driveway out toward the wetlands? I think those are things, that we encourage the design team to look at when we're trying to minimize impacts to the resource areas. So we want to know that every option has been considered and that we are, investigating every possible option to reduce impacts.
Absolutely, and we can definitely look at that. I wasn't out on site for it, but I know soil testing was a driving factor here. There were very inconsistent soils here, so that's why the septic was situated in the location that it is. So I'd have to talk to Jack Maloney from our office, who was out there on site doing the testing, to look at that option, but that's certainly something we can look into.
When we're on site, Ryan, would it be possible, would it be possible for us to just see a plan showing where the test pits were dug? So that we can
Yes.
see what areas were looked into?
Yep, I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Ryan, is it possible also for leaching fields, instead of being the long, narrow dimension that are shown, could you make them shorter and wider, or is that something that's standard?
We could. Typically, we try to cover the test holes that we've done, so it's like fitting the puzzle into where the testing actually was performed. But again, that's something that we can look into. We could do more lines and shorter length, definitely.
Okay.
Any other commission member questions right now? Any members of the public here tonight want to comment on, I guess we're lots 5 Meadow Road now? All right, not seeing anyone. And I know we don't have the DEP numbers. So Rebecca, if you would be so kind as to try to help us organize a site visit sometime within the next 2 weeks.
Yes.
I believe our next meeting is the 18th. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And what is our first available time?
7:30.
Okay. Then Ryan, with your permission, I'm going to go ahead and continue these until our next meeting.
Yep, that works for us.
Okay. Perfect. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for Lot 5 Meadow Road until our next public meeting, Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. Do I hear a second for continuing?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well. And now I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for Lot 6 Meadow Road until our next public meeting, Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 at 7:40 p.m. Do I hear a second for continuing?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Emily.
Are you waiting for an aye, Brian?
Yeah, but
I'm
if
sorry.
you're
Aye.
fine with us continuing until next meeting.
Yes.
All
Sorry.
right. No, you're fine. Bill,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
And Ryan, I will be coordinating with you once I hear back from commission members individually on their availability, and hopefully we can get that done within the next 2 weeks.
That sounds great. All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Rebecca, are you ready to continue?
Yes.
That's good. All right. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent filed for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, regarding the proposed construction of 3 single-family homes and the widening and paving of an existing gravel driveway. Excuse me. Do we have an update on this project this evening, or the applicant or somebody representing the applicant here tonight?
Yes, I believe Rachel and Matt Watsky are present representing the applicant.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Rachel Watsky. My Zoom starts as Matt Watsky, so I have to change it. So he's not here. It's just me and Dean Charter, the arborist, who did the report that was submitted at the prior meeting. I do apologize for the terrible lighting for me.
Sorry.
First time doing a Zoom meeting from home. Normally I'm at the office and I don't have any overhead lighting in this room apparently. But basically at the last meeting, my impression was that the commission wanted to have an updated site plan that showed the all of the trees, not just the ones to be removed within the line of work on the driveway. Scott Hayes is in the process of revising the site plan to show the trees that are going to be staying in place and the ones that are to be removed. They've gone through and confirmed all of those. The trees have been marked in the field, and he's in the process of revising the site plan. So that's just not quite done yet. One of the things that I'd noted from the last meeting was that seemed like it would be useful to have Dean Charter here to go over his report with the commission and answer any questions from the commission and the public, because he's really the expert on the trees. And unfortunately, Scott Hayes and I couldn't really give an answer on some of the concerns that were raised. So he is here for this evening to speak as needed.
Excellent.
Thank you. Also, Brian, just quickly, we are still awaiting a written response from Bolton's tree warden and the associated site visit. I have reached out to our tree warden, so I am waiting on his availability and for him to send that to me.
Okay. All right. So that said, members of the commission have questions regarding the report we had received at last meeting, the arborist report from last meeting. Now that we have the arborist. Are there any outstanding questions that somebody would like to bring up first? Have any initial questions?
I had one question only, Brian.
Go ahead.
We started
Please,
to
Bill.
talk about this, and I don't think we got too far with it. What is the difference? And I'm not sure what the term is, but I think it's respiration. How much water actually is evaporated from a treetop? And I'm not sure what the term is, but what is the difference with the canopy that's there now versus what is proposed? And if that calculation has been done at all?
Is that the evapotranspiration or?
Yeah, it's something, I forget what the term is.
And I can ask you for the arborist, do you have an answer for that? An idea of what replacing the existing canopy as it exists today with now less mature trees and a lot more open space above there, how that will affect, or will that affect the water transpiration? It's the evapotranspiration.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Of the
what the
water.
term is either.
I wish I could pronounce that correctly.
If we take out mature white pines and put in red maple, what's the difference? What's the delta?
So I'd be happy to address that.
Please.
So obviously the existing standard trees are much larger. They're certainly absorbing more water than if you replace them. You know, if you've got a 12-inch diameter tree and you're replacing it with a 3-inch diameter tree, obviously 3-inch diameter tree does not have the ability to absorb the same amount of water. Now, a couple of the thoughts that we've got in regards, and I've not done a calculation that's frankly beyond my capabilities to come up with a calculation of how much water each of those pines is absorbing.
Do you have a rough order of magnitude what a mature white pine does versus a mature red maple?
Well, actually, red maple would actually probably absorb more water just because.
But you don't actually have a number is all I'm asking.
No, I do not have a number.
Okay. So we can't do a calculation then like I was looking for.
But the red maple, which is one of the recommended, one of the ideas we've kicked around, and certainly red maple is going to, because of some existing red maples there, they're certainly going to expand in size. They're a wetland species, so they would have a greater capacity to absorb water and a greater need to absorb water than white pine. White pine is tolerant of wet conditions, but it also will grow fairly well in a high gravel bank. So I don't think there's going to be a tremendous difference over time. with the amount of water that's being absorbed. The other thing that needs to be calculated in here as well, or thought about, is it opening up the area, making the driveway wider, and opening up to more sunlight. Obviously, there's going to be more evaporation of that area. It's not going to be as shady in the width of the driveway. I know that Scott Hayes has done quite a bit of work on looking at the design of the driveway as far as being able to handle the increased runoff, and he has some software that they work with to come up with these designs to know that they can absorb the amount of water. But as far as giving you a specimen by specimen ratio, I do not have that.
I noticed we have a member of the public, Jim Garrity. Rebecca, if you could unmute him, I'd be curious to hear your question, Jim.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Question to Dean. When the driveway gets put in, right, so they're going to dig down 24 inches plus, they're going to open it up by 2 feet on each side. I know that you mark 21 Century Road, so I live on the lot. How many trees are going to die as a result of putting in a driveway?
Well, the plan that I had come up with earlier showed the ones that we thought there was a good chance that these trees were going to die because they're in such close proximity to the construction area. So I don't remember what recall the number offhand. It was 20 odd trees, something like that I felt, between in and of themselves being not great specimens, and then as well as the proximity of the excavation work, I did my best estimate as to which ones are likely to die. Now, then you've got obviously the other area, and I know that there was some discussion about this in the past about critical root zone. Obviously, if a standard calculation is that for every inch in diameter of the trunk of a tree, you go out a radius of 1 foot as figuring out the critical root zone of a tree. These are the roots that are really essential for the maintenance of the tree. So 20-inch diameter pine, for instance, you go out a 20-foot radius, that area is considered the critical root zone. And that's a calculation that's done. It's a standard that's come up from arborists working with this, and then it actually is a standard in certain bylaws in other towns that I work in. So in those areas, you need to take as much care and eliminate as much intrusion into that root zone as possible. That does not mean that you can't work there. It means you have to take certain care in doing that. Sort of care that you look at within that critical root zone are things like, should you add additional wood chips on an area if you think you're going to have traffic on a temporary basis over the roots of the tree? If you have to trench in an area, do you trench using a machine until you encounter a root of a certain diameter, usually 4 to 6 inches, and then you have to use hand shovel and tunnel underneath it? Frequently, these areas of critical root zones will be delineated in the field with things like chain link fence or orange construction fence to try to minimize the amount of traffic that you get over the roots during the construction process. So, when we talk about critical root zone, you can actually do some intrusion within those critical root zones. And depending upon how much intrusion it is, you don't necessarily doom the tree to failure. It's something you have to be aware of, and you have to take mitigation to make sure that you minimize the amount of impact on the trees. But, if you, obviously with the size of the trees, and since it's such a forested area, there's certainly going to be some impact on the critical root zones of some of the trees that might be, the trunk of the tree might be 20, 25 feet outside the proposed excavation area. But technically, you might, some of those roots might still be a couple of feet, or the roots might be within a couple of feet of the edge of the critical root zone. So as far as how many trees are going to die there as a result of any construction, based on my 40 years of experience, I think that we've made the best guess estimate as to which trees are likely to survive. A lot of other things that have to be taken into effect is, the length of construction. How long is the roadway going to remain open and excavated? Is that going to create any strange sudden drop in the water table? So all of these things have to be looked at holistically. But I think that what we've done is made our best estimate as to the trees that we know are going to die. If you were to say, well, we want to make sure that any tree that has a critical root zone that might include the driveway needs to be removed, then, we could be taking down 50, 60, 70 more trees, which I don't think is necessary. And I don't think it's a good idea, because it's just going to open up a huge field there.
Jim, does that basically answer your question to the extent that Mr. Charter is able to?
Yeah, sure. What I get confused about is that there are trees that are not marked, that are larger, they're 25 to 30 inches in diameter, that are closer to the current driveway that weren't marked. And there's a lot of them. And that's what troubles me, quite frankly. I'm trying to understand the consistency of how the analysis was done. And there's got to be 15 or 20 trees that are larger than some of the trees that were marked that are closer to the road.
Well, the only thing I can say is I know that there's been more work has gone on out there. And I'm planning on meeting with Scott Hayes out there at some point, probably in the next week, to go over some of the trees that he identified or that he's got questions on. So that's the revised plan that Rachel Watsky mentioned earlier in the meeting. There are a few trees that, on the plan that I had, there was a sign of a little, like a turnout closer to the existing house. And those trees, I did mark them in the field because they're shown on the plan to be removed. So those are actually further away than some of the ones that are closer to where the driveway is just being widened out. So I think that might be the answer to your question there.
No, I don't think so. I think that my understanding is that the trees that were marked, I know the cutout that you're talking about, those I don't think were a result of the driveway. I think those were a result of construction when they for the proposed construction. I don't think those were marked as a result of the driveway. That's my take on it.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please, Rebecca.
So I just want to, and I appreciate the questions. I think they're relevant, but I just want to circle back to the current project and the current sort of task at hand. So there's been a revised plan that's being created. It sounds like the trees that were marked on that first plan and not every single tree. So now it's being revised to include every single tree on these plans. And Dean's going to go out with Scott to review those areas. So that means they're not all marked right now. Would that be correct?
My understanding from a conversation I had with Scott earlier this evening is that he went back out and marked some additional trees that he had questions on, and he's put some pink colored paint dots on those trees. So those are specifically the ones that I will go out and take another look at.
Right.
The ones that I determined should be removed were all marked in the field with a small piece of orange flagging with a thumbtack.
Okay.
So obviously, I can't make any prediction about what went on in the field in the last week or so since I wasn't out there.
And then
He marked two
to
additional
that,
trees.
excuse me. And to that extent as well, the trees that you marked, and then the trees now that Scott has marked, that is within the proposed limit of work. You did not go outside of the proposed limit of work, even though the critical root zones from trees outside of the limit of work may be impacted. And I'm saying maybe as a general term, the way you've defined it this evening. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So, and then Mr. Chair, through you, I would like to just comment to the abutter that may be why not all trees that have a risk of being impacted have been marked, because it is outside of the limit of work. They're not proposing to remove them. And would that be more clear at that time?
Well, I think once I've seen the new plan and once I've gone out there and taken a look at the field, I could speak a little more intelligently about it. But you know, I don't think anyone, certainly it's not my proposal. I don't think the applicant has proposed that we take down every tree that might have some impact to its critical root zone. That's just really excessive and frankly not a responsible way to go about this process.
Right. And so to be clear, I don't think anyone is stating that you're proposing to remove those. I think the question from the abutter and then the inquiry from the commission was how many trees are going to be impacted, and that would then inform your mitigation or the applicant's mitigation effort, even though it may be outside of the proposed limit of work. Mr. Chair, would that be clear to say?
I think that's fine. That helped to kind of clear it up. I think they're looking at, again, as Rebecca said, trees that might not be inside the limit of work that we have a feeling are going to be affected by that work zone.
Yes, when I go back out there, I'll certainly evaluate that.
Okay. All right.
If I may, I would want to interject that it's.
Please, Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the part of the commission's review process is looking at what's proposed on the inside of the limit of work. And just as Dean had said, just because this very basic, just blind calculation of 1 inch equals 1 foot critical root zone, just because something that's 20 feet away from the limit of work line might say that, oh, well, this tree itself is 30 inches wide, so their critical root zone is actually, I guess it's 30 feet, but it's 20 feet away. It might not even have any impact. It might not actually have roots that extend all the way in that direction. And it also, I think, as when I spoke with Dean earlier, I think it was described that might just be a hangnail, as the same kind of effect as we might see it as, oh, that's a little annoying, but it's not going to hurt us the same way. So having some construction done 20 feet away from the tree might not injure the tree. It might just, the tree notices the problem and then adapts over time and goes in and just does fine afterwards. And I do think that's important to keep in mind, that I would say it seems excessive to expect the applicant to go and label every tree outside of the limit of work that might possibly be impacted, because we can't speak to that. It's certainly something you can include as something to consider, to have some concern, like Dean said, during construction. You want to make sure you're not chopping up a very large root, something like that. But it doesn't seem reasonable to expect the applicant's experts to go out and label every tree that might possibly get slightly negatively impacted that's outside of the limit of work.
Mr. Chair, through you,
Go ahead, Rebecca, please.
I would agree primarily with most of that statement. I think the reason I'm not suggesting, and again, it's at the discretion of the commission, though, to request what they will from the applicant relative to the jurisdiction of the commission. I personally am not suggesting to the commission to have every tree outside of the limit of work marked. What I am suggesting is that the applicant and their representatives who are experts or have that experience need to be considering those impacts as part of what they're addressing in the mitigation process. So that's where it's important to understand where the critical root zone is, or the potential impacts and potential death of a tree, and therefore the impact and alteration of that resource area. And under our local bylaw, that is a resource area. So that's where it ties back. But I do appreciate that note, and I do understand your statement, but I do want to just clarify that this does have to do with the mitigation associated with the performance standards in our local bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act for both the resource areas and or the wetland resource areas that are adjacent and the resource area of the adjacent upland resource area, which has specific performance standards. And with that as well, the commission does have the ability to condition areas that, and again, not applicable for this particular discussion, but areas that are outside of the 100-foot buffer or the adjacent upland resource area or 200-foot riverfront area that may impede those performance standards, as I'm sure you're aware. So just a point of clarification, and I do appreciate that statement, but it's relative to the mitigation that ultimately needs to be done or considered for this project.
I hope that clears things up for a number of people, including Mr. Garrity. And again, it looks like we'll be meeting again on this because we're waiting for that final plan too. So there will be another chance to ask questions. If you don't see what you're looking to have addressed somehow further explained when we get those additional plans in. Any other members of the commission have additional questions while we have the arborist, or based on the report that we had gotten at last meeting? Okay. Any other members of the public wish to comment or have questions regarding this project this evening?
Hi, Brian. Richard Davis.
Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Dean, you said at one point in your statement that 50 to 70 more trees could possibly be affected. I just want to be real clear on that. Are you saying that there are 50 or 70 trees that aren't currently marked, that their critical root zone might be in that area where they're going to be digging 2 feet deep to widen and install the driveway?
Well, my thought was, and you know, that was a number that I picked out of the air, but
I understand.
You know, if you go with the standards used in some other towns, and looking at, you know, 1 inch in diameter is equivalent to 1 foot in radius of the critical root zone. Considering it's a heavily wooded site, if you were to calculate the critical root zones using that standard on both sides of the road, yeah, there will probably be some intrusion into the critical root zones of these trees as defined by the 1-to-1 ratio. The question is, you know, is that bit of intrusion that you might have, is that going to be a serious impact on the tree? And, you know, that's the question that, you know, that's why when I went out and took a look at and marked the trees that I thought there would be so much damage to the critical root zone, the tree is going to die or it's going to be a hazard. So those are the ones that in my initial work, I specifically marked and said, these have to come down. And then beyond that, it's sort of conjectural. You know, if you've got there could be a piece of the critical root zone that goes into the excavated area that could be the size of my desk. You know, is the loss of that much root mass, is that going to be critical for a tree that's 30 feet away and is 70 feet tall? No, it's not. But you know, if you decide just looking at a calculation, which, as I say, in other towns it's sort of a zoning calculation, then yeah, you've intruded into the critical root zone of the tree. Is it important to the health of the tree? Generally, no. But I think that, if you drive down that roadway and figure out the diameter of the trees and then calculate it from there, why you could have a very large number of trees that could have very minimal intrusions into their critical root zones. So it's, just the fact that you've gone 1 foot into the critical root zone of a tree and done an excavation does not mean that you've doomed the tree to failure.
Do we have a certain kind of quantifiable parameter that they use in other towns? I mean, you must come across this, a fair bit. I mean, if 10% of, let's say we took the rate, the circle of the tree and divided it up into quadrants. So, we've got 1% or we've got 100% of the quadrants. If 20% of the tree quadrant, the critical root zone is damaged in most towns, does that mean you're not allowed to excavate there? Or, I mean, it can be very
So in the town of Bolton, we do not have something that, and I mentioned this last time, we do not have something outside of the public shade tree that limits the removal of trees on properties. Again, it ties back to the performance standards jurisdiction within the state and local regulations. I will pose the question to Dean though, because he may know the number better than I do. I believe, unless I misunderstand, that a tree can live with about 1/3 of its heartwood. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think more to the point is, looking at removal of the roots rather than the heartwood.
I'm just using that as a point of reference because it's
Okay.
heartwood's obviously closer to the tree. So if you're talking about the removal of the roots, it's expressing exactly what you were talking about before, where the outer portion of the root system may be much like a hangnail. So it may still be that it meets the performance standards, even though it's impacted. But again, tying back to the performance standards. So if the tree's still able to produce the same rate of evapotranspiration or respiration, whichever system you're focusing on or process you're focusing on, that's what the commission is concerned about, because that's what's going to strengthen or deteriorate the performance standards of those resource areas.
Yeah, to that point, the trees within the limit of work that I looked at are all the ones that I figured that the excavation was going to remove at least 50% of the critical root zone of the tree. So, anywheres, if you lose 50% of the critical root zone of a tree, well, you've really caused some serious problems to it. And obviously, it matters if you're losing part of that critical root zone at the extreme edge where you're just, some fine feeder roots, or whether you're losing buttress roots because your excavation is within 3 feet of the trunk of the tree. Obviously, that makes a big difference as well. But, loss of 50% of the critical root zone of the tree probably is probably enough to say that the tree is going to either suffer greatly, go into decline. The old rule of thumb as far as evaluating construction injury is you don't really know where you stand until about 5 years after the construction injury has taken place. So some of these, if you had a situation where you did some work on there, but you had a series of fairly damp summers, the tree would tend to recover. Whereas if you went into a drought for 2 years, why obviously the tree is going to be impacted. And then, the other environmental factors and biological factors, if the tree gets defoliated by a defoliating insect, in addition to the construction injury, all these things sort of cascade one on top of another. But, loss of 50% or more of the critical root zone of a tree, in my opinion, means that the tree is probably going to die.
Any
Thank you, Dean. That's a useful number to have in mind.
other additional questions by members of the public or members of the commission? Rebecca, did you have any additional questions or comments?
I do not at this time, other than I will reach back out to the tree warden again, and hopefully we will be hearing from him shortly.
Okay. In that case, if it's okay with the applicant, can we continue this until our next meeting?
Yes, that's all right.
Perfect. All right. In that case, at this point, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, until our next public hearing Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 at 7:50 p.m. Do I hear a second for continuing?
I second Brian.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, Rebecca, are you ready to continue?
Yes.
All right. Obviously, this is the request for the certificate of compliance that we received at last meeting, and we had discussed and wanted to draft out the ongoing conditions.
Yes, so the ongoing conditions have been drafted. Primarily, they were related to allowing areas within the jurisdiction of the commission to naturalize, and then to plant native species going forward as part of that maintenance and naturalization. And I believe that was the larger scope of it, but I did send you the draft for all of them.
And did any commission members have any questions on that draft or comments? Good. Any members of the public here tonight to comment on this request? And again, seeing
I
none.
see none.
Rebecca, if I was to make a motion to grant certificate of compliance with the ongoing conditions as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting, would that be sufficient for? Beautiful. All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we issue a certificate of compliance for 811 Main Street, DEP file number 112-681 with the following ongoing conditions that have been drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have in the applicant. So at the last meeting, the Conservation Commission issued the certificate of compliance for 285 Still River Road under DEP file number 112. Should be a 0 in front of that, 1120600. The applicant and their representative are asking that the commission consider authorizing the release of the funds left for this project.
And we had already, we already did the certificate of compliance. Any commission members have any strong thoughts or feelings as to why we wouldn't release the escrow for this project at this point?
How will that, I guess the property is changing hands, so then potentially buyer would be given money to fulfill the conditions?
No,
So
so
how does
this-
that ensure that the work gets completed?
So the work has been completed already. There are ongoing conditions that the commission issued at the last meeting. Those ongoing conditions remain enforceable regardless of the release of these funds. So those conditions are in perpetuity on the property. The funds are for the initial mitigation being done and created, which the commission at their last meeting added some conditions to make sure that ongoing things did occur for maintenance, but primarily that it was complete.
So if my memory serves me correctly, there were some shrubs that had been planted that had been eaten by the deer.
Yep.
And then there was all the mulch that had been laid down where we wanted the area to naturalize. So I guess, how do we ensure that that happens?
We still have,
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, and Rebecca, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we still have the ability, these are ongoing conditions. If they're not meeting these ongoing conditions, we do have the ability to issue fines in order to get them to meet these ongoing conditions. And part of what I would consider with this is, and we've changed our kind of policies on this a bit, this was when individual applicants were asked to put aside escrow money in case we had to come in and finish the project. I think it's fairly safe to say regarding this project, it's not something that we would want to say, all right, that's it, enough. You didn't do it right. The plants aren't taking. We're going to come in and take over. We're going to hire somebody to do it, and we're going to do the whole project. I think we would be in a better position to say, you haven't done it. We're going to issue this fine, and we're going to continue to issue fines until you go ahead and fix it. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense, Brian, but the property is changing hands.
No, I know. And it's a way to
So
get the escrow money back to the original owners.
Understood,
put it
but
up.
then how do we ensure that the person purchasing the property is going to plant the native species? Because we agreed last time that it was likely that those were not native blueberries that were planted, and that the mulch is getting cleaned up or not replaced so that that area can naturalize. So I guess I know that we voted with conditions last time, and now we're voting to release escrow, but as the property changes hands, how do we ensure that that area is allowed to naturalize and the native plantings are put in place in the spring when they can plant again and the property has now changed hands completely?
So with that, part of the funding that was set aside for this project, so actually technically it was two before me. When Carol was here, she was out on site, inspected the property as well, and it was found to be in compliance at that time. So it was complete. They didn't ask for the release of funds, unfortunately. They didn't ask for their certificate of compliance. I can't speculate as to why, because it maybe they felt they were going to live there forever, who knows. Then they request the certificate of compliance. So now the commission has issued that with the ongoing conditions. The ongoing conditions run with the property in perpetuity. So a new property owner, come spring, I can request a site visit, and if that is not done, I can issue fines, because that would mean they are not in compliance with the order of conditions, or excuse me, the ongoing conditions that are recorded at the Registry of Deeds and runs with the property in perpetuity, regardless of the owner. The project that the funds were given to have been issued a certificate of compliance with ongoing conditions. Those funds were held for the purpose of doing that project. So although there's ongoing conditions, the release would be that, yes, it's been done and it is in compliance, but we would like to see this done in the future for maintenance of that area. Because as part of the original order, although the mitigation planting was required, native species and allowing the area to naturalize was not part of that verbiage. So going forward, they need to maintain it that way. Unfortunately, the original order of conditions does not. The ongoing condition specifies maintaining how that mitigation area should be maintained. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
I know typically it wouldn't be done this way regarding if something wasn't complete, but where I have documentation from the past conservation agent and correspondence saying it was complete, it was in compliance, I am comfortable with the commission considering this and having it be on the agenda. If not, I would have relayed that to the applicant and said, well, you didn't have your 2 years required. they did have the 2 years, and unfortunately, this has occurred now.
And again, I could be wrong on this too in a legal manner too, but I think when we issue a partial certificate of compliance, it's okay for us to hold on to escrow. But I think escrow is actually taken and it said, you know, we're going to hold this escrow until you are issued a full certificate of compliance, regardless of whether it's a full COC with conditions or without conditions. I think the escrow money is taken basically saying it, you know, we hold it until you get the COC. So I think they would want to do this or anything, but if they wanted to push it legally and say, no, you got to give us that escrow money back, it would not shock me if they would win that in court because they do have a certificate of compliance, which technically is
correct.
all they need to get it back. So again, we can make it difficult, but I think the legally and easiest thing to do is just to give them their escrow back at this point. And like Rebecca said, just to we have the ongoing conditions, we have the ability to monitor and issue fines if they are not bringing it up to compliance. Is that all right? And any other commission members have questions or comments on this right now? And not hearing any, would everybody be comfortable if I move to release the escrow for this project?
Yes, Brian.
Okay. Looking, any members of the public here tonight to comment on this project? Okay, and seeing none. All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we release the escrow for 285 Still River Road. Do I hear a second on that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and I'll say I'm an aye myself.
I do just want to say as well that is a very good question to ask, though. There goes my screen. Because that can get a little confusing, but at the time an order of conditions is issued, typically there's more items than just a mitigation area. So it has dates associated with it, and then the commission can act if it's not completed by that date, or if something is, if they request their certificate of compliance and it is not done in compliance, as Brian stated, then at that time the commission can say, and they're basically abandoning the project, then the commission can step up and say, we would like to use these funds to take over, this is why, and then we would have counsel at that time weigh in to make sure that we are in the best position to complete that project. I just wanted to clarify that, but Brian, back to you.
Appreciate that. No, it's all right. So next up, did people have a chance to read the minutes from our, what was it, December 21st, 2021 meeting? And if so, do you have any edits, corrections, changes? And if not, do you need more time to read the minutes? I read through them quickly this afternoon. I did not catch anything. All right. Hearing nothing, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our December 21st, 2021 meeting as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Emily.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Jillian.
I was not in attendance, so.
You can abstain from that.
Abstain.
All right. And Rebecca, I'll be an aye as well. Would you like to run us through the updates, Rebecca, if possible?
Sure, I would be happy to. So I will be leading a guided walk on the Sawyer Grist Mill site on the Rattlesnake Conservation Area on Tuesday, January 25th at 12 p.m. We'll be starting at Trailhead 1, which is the parking area off of Main Street and Route 117 by the lime kiln. Next, we still have our 2-year MVP Action Grant Program project. the Nashua River Communities Resilient Lands Management Project. If you are interested in participating in that project, please contact me. And we should have a project website up this month, I'm hoping. So I would encourage you to explore that site once it is up and running. We do still have our volunteer land steward position open. So if you know anyone or if you yourself are interested, please contact me or call the office.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rebecca. Any new business from commission members? None. Any funny New Year's Eve stories? Can't hear none. All right, in that case, I'd like to make a motion that we hereby adjourn the Tuesday, January 4th, 2022 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. Do I hear a second for adjourning?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an I as well. Happy New Year's to everyone, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Night. Thank you.